Good evening and welcome to the Wakefield School Committee meeting of Tuesday, December 10th, 2019. I'd like to call the meeting to order and start with our Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll start with our mission statement, as our tradition is. The vision of the Wakefield Public Schools is to graduate students who are confident, lifelong learners, who are respectful and caring members of their community. Our mission is to prepare students for college, career, and community by providing rich and challenging curriculum, high-quality instruction, and educational experiences that meet their individual needs and interests. I'd also like to state that this meeting is being recorded, and anybody that is speaking to the committee will be recorded on WCAT's broadcast. Anybody from the public who wishes to speak? Okay, then our Student Advisory Council. What is MSTC?
Oh, this is the track and field division that we're in.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'll start off this week. We had 8th graders come in, and we had usually a senior, I'm pretty sure, that gave them a tour around the school, and it gave them kind of like a vibe of how the high schoolers go to classes or what classes they take, and how big and different it is than the Galvin. So I thought that was kind of cool. We also had Academic Pride Night for the 8th graders as well, and that's when the students and the parents came to look at the different classes that you could take at the high school, and that's pretty good for both the parents and the kids because you want to know what your child's taking there too, and the kid too. I know last time I touched upon how we were going to have the pep rally that Wednesday, and that went really well. I think we both thought that it was
it was a lot of fun.
It was different, and all the classes got to be involved, so I think that made it a lot more entertaining and fun for the half day as well.
And it's not like it was just the athletic teams that were mentioned. It was the athletic teams, the band, the cheerleaders, so it was a good mix of all the different clubs and sports at Wakefield High School.
Great.
And the student-faculty basketball game. I know I was running to that after. The students won too, but that was a great tradition, so hopefully we'll keep that up because that
I
seemed
heard the win was contested.
We won by a basket, yeah.
So, hopefully we'll keep that because that seemed like a fun thing
Yeah.
that a lot of kids went to.
Mm-hmm. And I have that finally winter sports are kicking off. We were a little bit delayed with the snow, but I know both on the girls and the boys sides, the basketball teams have had a couple scrimmages, and their first games are both on Friday in Watertown. And both boys and girls hockey teams have had a couple scrimmages. Their first games are this weekend. And another thing that I know the seniors have been talking about to do at the home sports games is we're going to do like themes in the Red Sea, which is our fan section, so that's going to be really exciting. I know our first home game is next Friday, and we're going to do the ugly holiday sweaters as a kickoff into the winter break, so I'm really excited for that. And also touching on winter sports, there's a gymnastics showcase coming up, which has never been done at Wakefield High School, and it's just an opportunity for like anyone who can go and watch to see the different routines that the girls put on, so that should be a fun event. And I have that the Social Awareness and Interact Club are running a couple different fundraisers, if you will. They're doing the care bags, which is you donate different everyday necessities, and they go to the less fortunate, I think in Wakefield, I'm pretty sure. And that's the same with the Giving Tree, which we're doing, where it's in our library. You can take a name off of the board and then just buy a Christmas present for the less fortunate, so that's also really nice as well.
I heard you got challenged by Melrose for the 10,000 toys for girls and boys. Was that challenge taken up?
Oh, I didn't know about that.
That's good to know, though.
Well, if you don't know about it, it's too late. I think it's done this weekend. I thought I remembered reading about that.
Possibly.
Oh, I know the peer leaders are all bringing in. They're doing another fund. They're bringing in toys as well, so it could be that.
Yeah, it all goes back to the Toys for Tots, but there was, you know, like different high schools would, if they were involved, then they would challenge their rival to also be involved. It was kind of growing like that, and I thought I read that Melrose challenged Wakefield. So.
Interesting. I also had the senior movie is being filmed this week, and I'm not in it, but all I know is the plot. I'll give you the inside scoop. The plot is the class officers are taking over the school, so it should be interesting.
A bloody coup?
For bloodless.
Yeah, that's all we have.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
You all ready for winter break?
Yes. It's been a lot. Senior year's been a lot, but it's been fun too.
It's going to disappear before you know
I
it.
know.
Any news about schools?
I find out this weekend, so.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. I found out from one, but I'm still waiting.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, move on to our consent agenda, please.
Move that the school committee approve the minutes of the November 26, 2019 meeting as presented.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any comment? Okay, all those in favor? Abstention?
I'll abstain.
Okay. And budget report.
So you have before you tonight the financial statements through November 30th, 2019. The only other item, which Chris happened to point out, that we hadn't yet encumbered our transportation, but we're doing that this week. So you'll see those encumbered for the next financial statements. But everything else in the grants looks like it's in good shape.
And the, when's your next payment from the circuit breaker? Do you know?
The second quarter should be December, so by the end of this month.
So soon, okay.
Yep.
Any
So
questions?
is that transportation part of the Chapter 70? Is it, or is that, or the circuit breaker, Chapter 70, has that,
Circuit breakers for SPED.
so the transportation, wasn't there a piece of the Chapter 70 funding?
They're
Is that going
changing
to,
it.
It's changing.
it's changing,
Yeah.
so it will affect the transportation?
Chapter 7 just goes to the town anyway. And
Right.
then, so then, you know, it'll be earmarked for sped transportation, but it's
Right.
not, that's.
So it's not reflected yet?
No.
Okay,
No, it's going to evolve over the next 7 years.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any payroll warrants?
Yes, we have 3 payroll warrants.
Move that the school committee approve payroll warrants number 18, number 20, and number 22 as presented.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Be unanimous. And it's my understanding there are no gifts tonight, right?
No gifts,
Okay.
but I do have some bills to sign after the meeting.
Okay, we can take care of that. Okay, under chairman's comments, updates, you know, we had our retreat, as you all know, this is basically for the public. So this committee met for 6 hours last Saturday. Had some really interesting discussions, learned a lot of new things about each other, I think, in the process. And thank you to Christine and Doug and Kara for attending. I thought Kara was here. There she is. Okay. And yeah, I think it was a very productive time for us. And you know, we always could learn something new at that type of a meeting. I received some feedback that I forwarded to you today, just, you know, follow-ups from the MASC representative, Dorothy Presser from Linfield, who sent us some documentation and some example policies, and we discussed developing a school committee handbook. She sent us a link to some existing things. I think I'd like to tackle those at a meeting in either January or February. Okay, and our Boston meeting with the Metco parents has been rescheduled for to be our February 11th meeting. So we'll get back to you with the follow-up details of the place and time are the same as was before, I'm assuming, Doug?
Mhm.
Okay. So-
Yep.
But we'll send you that, so you just
That'll be
have
sent
something
out.
fresh, okay? And moving on to superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Callanan. Just updates from me. And so last week, we had a late start on Monday and a snow day, our first snow day on Tuesday. In regard to snow day, we need to thank the teachers and students for doing a great job in regard to completing assignments through our Learn Anywhere project. I think we got pictures from parents, which we appreciate. Please keep sending them. Teacher assignments were, I don't know that they've ever been better, to be honest. I think it was really nice to see the work that students were doing. We saw kind of older siblings working with younger siblings, and just hearing from parents, I think that they appreciate the opportunity to work on during snow days. Just so that people know, I know we mentioned this earlier in the year, the Commissioner of Education, who will be here in January, had made a decision to discontinue the Learn Anywhere or Blizzard Bag projects for all districts in the Commonwealth. And so I think that this isn't something that's done. I do think it's going to come back up, and I do think it's going to be studied over time. And my hope is that they reconsider it soon. And so, but moving into next year, we will not be able to continue with our Learn Anywhere project. So we'll have more information to follow on that. In regard to the late start on Monday, I need to apologize to families and to teachers. We got the word out a little bit late. We're a little rusty on day one for our late start. I think day two worked a whole lot better, and we got a lot of positive responses for day two. And so we're working at it, chipping away, trying to get better each time. And so calendar items, the Wakefield Public Schools State of the Schools address will be Wednesday, January 15th at Galvin Middle School at 7 p.m. in the auditorium. And so we'll be sending out a notice to the community as well. And so I'd like to invite Bob Shiroli up to give a brief facilities update.
Thanks, Doug.
Sure thing, Bob.
Good evening, everyone. To give you guys a quick facilities update, it won't take up too much of your time. I'll start with the MSBA, which is Mass State Building Authority. We have two items on the MSBA agenda. One is our Greenwood accelerated repair roof, and one is the high school. I'll start with the Greenwood roof. We were approved with the MSBA ARP program to get 50% funding, as I've told you guys in previous reports. The feasibility study funds for the MSBA ARP to cover the OPM, Owner's Project Manager, and Architect, which is our schematic design, were approved at town meeting on November 18th for the sum of $102,800. These funds will be used for the design scope and also to investigate whether we can put solar on the Greenwood roof or not. I'm meeting with them on Monday, the 16th, and we'll get a full report on cost of the project that they're proposing, as well as whether we can put solar on the roof. So we should have an update next week on that to move forward, and in the hopes that we'll be able to hit our January 2nd deadline of getting everything submitted so we could get the work done in the summer of 2020. But as I hear more from our architect and our OPM, I will let you guys know as well. With the high school, as you all know, we submitted our request for the fourth time for a new or renovated high school back in April of 2019. The MSBA will release who is accepted, and we will find out tomorrow whether we are or are not accepted to the program this year.
I think the students are excited to hear.
Sorry, guys.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, you can always come back and visit. As Doug mentioned, winter prep Our department has been working hard with the DPW to prepare for the winter. We've had our first storm and first wait start, as Doug mentioned, last week. We have a clear plan on how we're gonna clear the snow around the school, sidewalks. Our number one priority, as most of you know, is to make sure they're safe, coming and going from the school for both faculty, students, and any visitors, that are coming to the schools. Doug and I, as we've been working a lot on this. We know communication early and often is the best way to go. We're learning from our late start on Monday and feedback from teachers and staff and families. So that's really, communication early and often is where we're trying to make our best foot forward with snow and delays. And last but not least, the Woodville indoor air quality. The indoor air quality is something the Department of Public Health does per request. At the beginning of this year, end of last year's school year, we tested both the Greenwood and the high school. These reports came back clear and within acceptable levels at both schools. There has been recommendations that the public health makes to try to get better airflow in the schools, and we've been working with the DPW to try and make any of these recommendations that we are able to.
So Bob, just to be clear, in regard to these assessments,
Yep.
These are part of standard preventative maintenance?
Yep, so one of the things we really want to do is look at all of our schools, see how we can improve airflow.
Yeah.
One of the things that this study covers is carbon dioxide levels, temperature, relative humidity, carbon monoxide, and fine particle matter.
Yep.
I walk around the schools with members of the DPH, and we test for all of these. And as we go through, it's to show what we can improve upon, but also, as Doug alluded to, preventative maintenance on making sure our schools are safe and healthy places for teaching and learning. And we will continue to look at each and every school by the end of the school year. So spring of 2020, every school will be completed. And these are all public records, so you can go on the Department of Public Health website to look at these and read through them if you would like.
I've been curious, and I have not heard anything, but now that the heating systems have had a little bit of a challenge, are there any issues?
No, we've just been fine tuning it with the DPW if we have cold or hot spots throughout the buildings. The DPW has been great partners, and they've been coming over to the schools and helping out, just to fine tune in classrooms that teachers feel are warm or cold. But for the most part, everything's been running, knock on wood.
I don't want to jinx you.
But yeah.
Any questions for Bob?
I just have one question in regards to the field house.
Yep.
There was a leak yesterday, and I'm just assuming it was maybe all the snow melted, or is there actually a problem with the roof?
Well, the roofs of the high school, including the field house, are old and definitely need some work, if not new roofs. Question.
Thank you.
I was actually on the roof today with the new roofer the DPW took on board, and we were looking at it.
Okay.
And we're trying to find the leaks and patch those.
Okay,
And
good.
we're well aware that we have basketball season is upon us and games in there, so
Yep.
definitely trying to keep it safe for the kids. And
Well, they were there tonight, so that's good.
yeah,
They were able to play tonight?
Yeah, they had
Yeah,
practice,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Tom?
Thank you. Thanks, Bob. Thanks for the update and report. I have a question regarding the winter prep plans and the clearing,
Yeah.
the clearing snow. Almost to ask a hopefully obvious question, but do you feel that we're in good shape between your department and the town in making sure that all of the walking routes will be clear? We have a plan, we know whose jurisdiction is where, especially not just the elementary schools, but all of the schools that have students that walk to them, and most of them all do.
yep.
But we have some sidewalks and pathways that are outside of the
Purview of the
of
schools.
one
yeah.
department, and were you in good shape about clarity around all that?
Yeah, so our department, the school custodians are in charge of cleaning all the sidewalks around the schools. And then the town is in charge of the roads and any sidewalks leading to the schools. So I've definitely met with Joe Conway and Don Schneider about what we own, what they own, and what we need to do to make sure they're cleared, salted, and try to get any ice or slip hazards off of the areas.
Great.
But
Great.
yeah, we have met, we've went over kind of all the routes and areas of concern. I've also met with the principals or assistant principals on any of their concerns that they may have.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
I think that's it.
All right. Thank you.
Quick
Thank you,
night.
Bob. Our next topic on the agenda is to invite Bridget Haggerty, our English Department Coordinator, to the table with Kara Morrow to talk about ninth grade English. Along with Amy.
Amy has a couple
Go
of
on.
slides as well.
Who's smiling? Somebody's digging.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So we thought we would come tonight. Bridget Haggerty is an ELA teacher at the high school. She's teaching ninth grade English this year, as well as our department coordinator. And Amy McLeod, as you know, is our high school principal. So we thought we would come before you tonight and just give a quick update around how grade 9 ELA is going this year. There was a change made to the program of studies last year and the decision to unlevel grade 9 ELA. So we thought with the program of studies being on the agenda for tonight, we would give a quick touch point in terms of how things are going. So the way we've set up the presentation is just to talk to you tonight about the class makeup. What does it look like in terms of the students, who's teaching, how many classes, student profiles, and then we'll talk a bit about the professional development that the district has supported for our teachers teaching grade 9 English. And then just some anecdotal data, student parent feedback, how things are going with the teachers. I think Bridget's a huge resource for us, just teaching the class as well as participating in the PLCs. And then we'll also just talk about the different ways in which the students are being assessed. Great, let's just move on to our class overview.
So, hi everybody. Starting off with the class overview, what the classes look like. Currently we're running 13 grade 9 English classes. We have 4 teachers who are working in a PLC together. And as you know, our PLCs meet once every 6-day cycle, so those 4 teachers, Mrs. Haggerty is one of our teachers. She is also not only teaching an English 9 course, she's teaching the co-taught sections with Mrs. Kramer. Jess Snow is teaching one of our 9th grade courses, Mr. Brennan, Ms. Fishman. Ms. Fishman's class actually right now is being covered by Ms. Aiello. And so those are the 4 teachers who are working together in the PLC. Class sizes for the 9th grade, as we talked about last year, we were able to keep them low. We're averaging around 16 for our class sizes, which is a really nice, manageable class size if we visit those classes. We were talking, the 3 of us, this week a little bit. We've been lucky to visit those classes a lot. Kara and I were actually in the classrooms today visiting a little bit. And while there is a range, you know, with the high school schedule, with outliers and singletons, how different courses can fluctuate in numbers. The average is nice, 16. I think the highest at this point is 22, and I think the lowest we are down to 13. So we have a little bit of a range, but that average is nice, and so the students are able to get a lot of individualized attention from the teachers in the class. We are going to talk about curriculum resources. I think we've been lucky both with professional development that we're going to talk about next, but also the resources that the teachers have been able to work with. We are still using the Pearson curriculum, but as Carol will talk about in the next slide about professional development, the teachers have worked really hard under Bridget's supervision around really making some tweaks to the curriculum and using those resources wisely.
All right, so just moving in to recap some of the professional development. I know that I've spoken with you at different meetings about the PD that we've offered to the teachers, but I think it's just important to note how enthusiastic the teachers have been around this shift and their interest in participating in the professional development and just the large numbers for attendance that we've gotten. So we started back last June, and we worked with two consultants from Novak Education, Katie Novak and Ian Wilkins, and they ran a one-day session in June and then followed that up with a session in August with, I think, pretty much most, if not all, between the 2 days our English department at the high school attended. So it was really widely attended and a great use of their time. And then we also had different teacher groups working with, across all departments, I know I've talked to you about this too, just to continue our curriculum mapping project and working with the curriculum coordinators to identify priority standards and to map out units. And then the professional development has continued this year. As I've talked to you about our professional development structure, we have our 5 days dedicated to content PD, which our ELA teachers have participated in, as well as our 5-part series. And the 5-part series it offers a choice menu to teachers around different options that will help improve their practice. And we have about 18 teachers participating in the 5-part series with Ian Wilkins, who continued from the summer. We made a choice not to narrow it down to strictly grade 9 because we thought the information that was being presented primarily around UDL, Universal Design for Learning, would benefit other teachers as well. So we have about 18 teachers, a mix of teachers from Galvin as well as the high school, participating in that work together. And I think having the connection with Galvin teachers is great, just to have them have a clear understanding of what's, what they're preparing their students for as they enter the high school. And just I think there's a nice opportunity there for crossover. And then Amy mentioned PLCs. I'm sure Bridget will touch upon your PLCs as well and the work that's happening there. But that's continued professional development as well throughout the year, where our teachers are working together to talk about their classrooms, their instruction, assessments, and how things are going, and making, I feel like that's really the place to make the tweaks along the way, to see how things are going. So move on to, oh, sorry, thank you.
Hi. So I thought I'd start with just talking about some of the feedback that we've received in the English department. It's still we're almost halfway through the year, but we only have one report card out. We had one set of parent conferences. I asked all of the teachers who were teaching grade 9 to let me know what kind of conversations that they found that they were having with parents, both positive and negative, surrounding the shift to unleveling English 9. And we all met in our PLC shortly after, and the bulk of us felt like the parent feedback was positive. There were apprehensive parents who said that they were pleasantly surprised to see how things were going, that their students were coming home feeling as if they were being challenged. We had, out of all the parents that came, only one parent had negative feedback. She was still still concerned about her daughter being challenged and was looking forward to her daughter taking honors next year. But to hear one piece of negative feedback from all of the grade 9 parents that came that night, that made us feel better about our decision to move this way. I haven't received, as department coordinator, any emails from parents as a whole. In my classes, I've sat down with the bulk of my grade 9 students, or Ms. Kramer did, at least in our co-talk classes and some in my non-co-talk class. And we had conferences with students just to kind of set goals for the second term. And one of the things that we asked had to do with, how are you feeling challenged? What new supports do you feel like you need? Is there something that we're not giving you? And even the students that that I identified as being like your typical high flyers, that I was curious how they would feel about this. They said, no, I feel like I'm challenged. I feel like when I get it sooner than somebody else, that in our class you're really quick to ask me a follow-up question or send me on a different path where I can find my next step or to move forward. So that made us feel a little bit better about just those two levels of feedback. But that's just in conversations with with conferencing with students and parents. So in terms of teacher planning and assessment and how things have changed, we were really lucky to be able to have all of the grade 9 teachers in a PLC together this year. Many of us teach at different levels, and we're in one PLC. So previously, some of the other teachers who might have been teaching the same grade level as me were in a different PLC. So it's nice that all of us are together, and we all took the PD over the summer. And we spent a good week together in August, reaching back and taking a look at the curriculum mapping that we've done over the last year, taking a look at each of the units that we'll do, making sure that we all felt really good about the priority standards, lining them up with what we had noticed in previous years teaching grade 9, as well as taking a look at grade 8 MCAS data and trying to identify areas where these students needed work. And we'd had our class list at that point, so we could start to identify where we needed to focus. In our PLCs, we previously, so when we took for example, if you look up at the chart, we may have chosen certain standards for each term that we would really like hyper focus on, even though that we would be doing others, but these would be the really big key focus areas. So for, oops, what did I do?
Oh, no, you go to your bed.
It's bad.
The one behind you
I think I
is
broke it.
the one behind you is fine.
So one of the standards for term 1 in grade 9 that we focused on was using narrative techniques such as dialogue, pacing, description, reflection, multiple plot lines, to develop experiences, events, or characters. Like, that's a real wordy standard. So in the past, all students would have been asked to answer the same question. In the last few years, the Pearson program has offered us, at the end of the unit, that all students write a fictional narrative following, showing which matters more, the present or the future. We thought that it happened again, and I didn't even touch it.
There you go.
You got it. So we felt that in an effort to take what we know about differentiation, UDL, we wanted to make sure that we gave it many different options for this to meet students where they were. So now we took that same type of an idea and thought the focus really is writing a narrative. We read a lot of dystopian literature in that term. Students saw a lot of examples of how that question could be answered in a variety of different ways. So some of the prompts that students were offered gave them avenues for more creative pathways, like the two that are on the board. That students may have been asked to write a post-apocalyptic short story that shows how one can begin anew at the end of the world. Like, that seemed closely related to the original one. Whereas something that might have helped students connect to a real-world problem, where they might think of a problem in our world today and write a fictional narrative where they can kind of predict how this could go if somewhere down the road this were to continue the way that it was. But we also came up with a few other prompts that we felt would offer more structured support for students. And originally we were thinking that these few really focused on the types of students who might not even know where to start. So we had read Fahrenheit 451, a couple of short stories. So we felt like students, if they could have chosen a character or event from one of the stories that we read, and if they were to write a prequel or a sequel or something from another character's point of view, that would give them the supports that they needed in terms of a story to start with. And then they could still create an original narrative, but build off of the shoulders of the giants that we had already read. And surprisingly, like we found that most of the students that we thought would struggle with coming up with a story did choose one of these, but there were a lot of those students who I would have identified originally as being, more creative or high flyers. Some of them chose to focus on particularly one student she wrote an excerpt from Fahrenheit 451 from the point of view of Mildred, who is the main character's wife, and put a whole different spin on it. She really got invested in it and was really proud of her work. So it was really nice for us to see that all students in the class, with the variation in the prompts, like giving them different pathways to do the exact same thing, came out on the other side of it feeling as if they found a prompt that fit them because of the work that we had done in our PLC. And other things that we've always offered students, graphic organizers and ways to plan their work. So this graphic organizer at the top, asked students to identify the theme and then the 5 parts of a story plot. And some students, they were given this one that was a little bit of direction, a lot more open space. Some students were given this, well, they actually were all given all of them, and they could choose which one. So in my co-taught classes, I gave them to all of my classes, but I particularly came up with this with my co-teacher, of just little mini prompts inside of each column to give them supports in terms of how to think about these things. And they were also allowed to do some, if they wanted to do an outline or they wanted to do more of a free flow, bubble type of graphic organizer, like they all had to do some planning, but they had a little bit of control over which planner they thought they needed. I'd say most of the students stuck with one of these two. Some thought that was too busy for them and they wanted the one that had nothing on it because they could have more control over what they want. And what we liked about this was that it broke it up into 5 parts, and so we focused on each part with all of the students. But some students who would have write their story in 4 sentences, they were forced to kind of think about all pieces of how to plot out a story. And they then said, okay, my exposition will be one paragraph, my rising action will be another, and we could push those students who only wanted to write a paragraph to at least write 5. Whereas students who wanted or have the ability to be able to get more invested in how these parts could be broken up into smaller pieces, they may have taken the exposition of the rising action and like blown it up into 2 or 3 paragraphs if they felt like there were places for that type of division in there. So by the end of this, experience, we had students who grew from writing 1 paragraph to being able to write 5. They were still including all parts of the story, but they were doing it on different levels, depending on where they started. One of the pieces of that standard that we spent some time focusing on that I thought would be key to show you was, adding dialogue to your story. Like, a lot of times we can tell a story, we can maybe describe what happened, but adding dialogue is hard for students. And this student that I had in my class, he didn't want to add any dialogue. So it was hard to get him to start with basic structure, like this character says, and then that character says, and to have the grammar appropriate and the punctuation and quotation marks. And he was really proud of himself that all of his dialogue pretty much said, this person says, that person says. And he was proud when he got to the point where he could say, this man responds, and he varied his word choice. But for us, that felt like a win for somebody who came from, I don't want to add dialogue, I don't know how, to being able to do this. Whereas there were students who more craftily were adding dialogue to their selections, and so they may have found ways to put the speaker in the middle or vary their word choice and to say things differently. So these 2 students were both in the same class. They were both learning how to do dialogue, but through one-on-one support were pushed to move and grow a little bit in whichever direction that they could have, depending on where they started. Any questions?
Can I just add,
Oh, yeah,
one?
go ahead.
Just because I saw you in
Okay.
action today too, when she talks about that support, I think the way the teachers are structuring the classrooms, whether it be in pairs, it's allowing the teachers to facilitate and walk around the room and do individual check-ins. Would you say that's
Yeah,
fair?
I feel like a lot of us start the class with like a mini lesson where it's maybe like 5 or 10 minutes of this is what we're doing, this is the focus area, this is what you'll need to know when you like leave class today, how does it fit into the larger unit or the bigger standard that we're working on. And it's just like a mini lesson where there may not be too much questions and answers from students, but just so that we can kind of get out all of the information of where we want them to go, and then we send them off to work either independently or in groups. And when you came in today, I was on my stool, like sitting with students, talking to them, like talking to individuals about, we've now moved on to argumentative writing, and they were talking about counter arguments. And different people were struggling with where to go. Some of them have, we differentiated this terms prompts too, but this one was the most complete picture that I could have brought today. Yeah. But it usually starts off with, okay, everyone starts at the same, this is the focus, but then once they're broken off, we can, with a class of 16, we're able to talk to each student, each table, each group of students in every class, and be able to offer, different levels of support.
And I think we loved too the conversation between the students as well. When we walked in, there was a lot of chatter in the room, but it was all on topic. Students were challenging each other, and it was just great to see.
Kind of circles back to what we talked about last year. I remember having a conversation here at this table, and Colleen said something about we talked about raising the level of discourse.
Mm-hmm.
When Kara and I visited 3 different 9th grade ELA classrooms today, I can honestly say that every small group that I saw working today, the level of discourse, you couldn't differentiate which students were sort of high flyers in the classes, which students were students who were struggling. They were engaged in productive discourse. They happened to all be reading Lord of the Flies. Kara and I were able to jump into a couple of those conversations, and there was no reticence. I mean, the kids were talking to each other and to adults about text. And for an English teacher at heart, it really is sort of, it was amazing to see. So I think that the sort of presenting this anecdotal data around what we're seeing evolve at this time of the year, I think shows that we are making progress towards some of those goals that we hope to have some more concrete data. I know you've asked about that as the year progresses and we get more grades and more concrete data that we can show. So
One of the goals, I think, was also to kind of more evenly distribute ability levels. Mm-hmm. Were we successful in accomplishing that, do you think?
I think so. I think, and we we're talking more about this now as we're going into programming and scheduling with a new director of guidance who comes with a different perspective on the system that we use and some of the pieces that we can do a little bit differently. The makeup of the grade 9 classes has been something that I think overall has been pretty successful. We've even identified some ways now, not only in grade 9, but in some other ways that we can balance a little bit better and distribute a little bit better. I mean, I think the co-taught classes still exist, so there are some classes who need those supports, but I think across the board, again, in looking at the makeup of students and how teachers are talking in the PLC about who's in front of them, the PLC that I walked into, you are all having that you weren't at that PLC that day. They were having the conversation about the percentage of the classes that were functioning well, like a month into school, and how shocked they were. The 4 teachers who were there were really talking about feeling the mix was pretty even across the board. So I think that's been successful. Again, it's hard to show what that looks like in terms of numbers or breakdowns, but the feeling is that, yeah, the makeup is there.
Good. Yeah.
Great presentation, you know, a lot of good information that, you know, we can touch and hold and sort of understand. I'm curious about how you're differentiating your assessments of the students. I think, you know, one of the things that you're talking about is, Bridget, is growth, right? And that obviously differs from one student to another, but how do you quantify that?
So like with this particular writing assignment, a lot of it has to do with seeing where students start, and then on a one-on-one basis, like knowing that that student has grown and using the rubric to be able to think of, okay, well, this student has started at, you know, a 2, and that if the student has shown that they could add dialogue, we can move them up into a 3. Whereas if a student's already starting with being able to add dialogue, we want to see that that student can do something more with that dialogue. So just because that second student could already do dialogue doesn't mean that he should already be at a 4. Like, we want to see that evolve too. So that student probably would have started at a 3, but to push them into a 4, we need to make sure that they're doing something, they're adding something new to their skill set. Mm-hmm. I'd say in English classes, the bulk of what our bigger assessments look like have to do with writing. So a lot of it can be looking at individual students and kind of assessing through formative assessments, like where they start at the beginning and being able to look for that growth with the standards. For the types of assessments that are more like multiple choice and you know, types of things like that, I know in our co-taught class we have a few different versions that we may offer. Some of them, like some of the students in the co-taught class, like have on their IEPs that they need to have fewer options on multiple choice tests, or the wording to be a little simpler. So we might have variations of that, but they'll still be being asked like the same questions that tie into the same standards, but the wording on them might be simpler, or we might have eliminated one of the distractors so that the 3 choices are distinctly very different in order to offer them the same way to answer those questions. And like the most recent assessment that we gave, like, was a reading check quiz in my co-taught classes. We had students who typically would say that they didn't like to read, still getting like, you know, B's and A's on those assessments, because we were eliminating some of the wordier choices. So they were still being able to understand like what the question asked and being able to identify what the right answer would be. Mm-hmm. But some of those things that get in the way were removed so that they could see the right answer too.
Right, and so that makes a lot of sense for the co-taught classes. I'm thinking a little bit more about kind of the multi-level, right, or the unleveled, I guess, kind of mainstream classes. And, okay. You know, I think some of the parents might wonder, like, who gets an A, you know, because it's, I think sometimes people think that maybe kids are competing against each other in a way, you know, like if this person gets an A and that person gets an A, you know, they should be doing the same things, right? I mean, that's how some people
that's how some people
think of it, right? But I'm not sure that that's what's happening in your classroom, so I just wanted you to sort of explain.
So I wouldn't say that the student who started not being able to write dialogue, like his dialogue wasn't as strong as the second student's, But for him, that was such a big growth that as a teacher, like, I would have felt that that student grew much more than the second student because of where they started and where they got to. Like, the second student added a lot of different things to it, but it wasn't as monumental in terms of the starting point to the ending point. And this is where, like, we have a lot of conversations too, just struggling with the fact of we need to quantify and put numbers next to, like, how students grow in a particular standard. So we're still, we have these types of conversations in the department all the time. I think it's okay if, for one student, if he gets an A on something because he grew 2 levels on the rubric, and a student who only grew 1 level on the rubric, in a sense that the outcome and the work produced may not be identical. But at the same time, when we put them into numbers, we use the rubrics in order to try to put that in place.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
So I would just add to that, though, I think that the work and the struggle that Bridget's talking about is the work of standards-based instruction, right? It's something that across the board that we're looking at as we assess mastery of standards. So schools are now trying to grapple with what does proficiency of a standard look like versus what does an A look like. They're kind of different things.
Right.
And so by using a rubric, that helps to break down the standard. And so you break down the standard narrative technique into dialogue, into pacing, into description, and you try as best as you can to measure what that looks like. You could say the same thing for a biology standard in a lab. And how are you measuring where a student's proficiency is, not necessarily, and what is proficiency? Is that a B? Is that a C? Is exemplary an A? So and I'm not sure I have the answer to that, nor am I sure that all of our teachers have the answer to that now, but I think the interesting part of this is teachers are creating rubrics, they're talking to kids about rubrics, and more importantly, they're talking to kids about proficiency in standards, because we want our students to know, where are you in that standard, so that when we talk to you about standards, it's not sort of some jibber jab that teachers just say. It's kids understand what the standards are and how good they are at those standards. So we're hoping that that's work that's way bigger at our school right now than just 9th grade English. So, and it's tough stuff. I don't know that we have all the answers. So.
Yeah. Thanks.
Tom?
Thank you. This presentation is not only very timely, but certainly most appropriate here at the end of the termish, yes. So, and it's certainly something that, as you all know, we were very supportive of this change, even though we went through quite a bit of conversation, public dialogue, and some pushback and concerns. So it's really good to hear one at this point, and I certainly hope that maybe come March or April we'll come back and hear some more.
And I should have said that in the introduction. I think that definitely is the plan, to just to be able to come back later. And we said late winter with more information.
Excellent. As a parent of a 9th grader, I enjoyed reading Fahrenheit 451 again. That's a deal that my son and I have when a book comes about, especially one that I actually remember enjoying. There were some that I didn't fully read with him, but I did enjoy.
You're not doing Tale of Two
again.
Cities again?
Yeah, but so that being said, I had full faith in the teachers and the staff's ability to differentiate. That was never a concern that I had last winter and spring when having these conversations. In fact, I had nothing but faith in the staff's capacity to make this work, and was quite supportive of that. Even though the parents raised concerns, and some of them quite emotionally and appreciative of what those concerns are, and I think so. It's good to hear that even though it's anecdotal, that the feedback that you're getting, at least so far, although it's probably from a minority, right, is certainly positive. One question is about: is there some mechanism or means by which we may be open to other feedback, as opposed to just the parent-teacher conferences, or some other way to be able to allow those parents to continue to express themselves that may continue to have concerns. Obviously, this year, while it's not at all a pilot of any kind, it's certainly a learning opportunity for us to be able to take something that is so different from the way that we had done business and do it in a different way. And so that feedback, maybe there's another sort of outreach that we could have of some kind, or an openness to that, which I'm sure everyone is, meaning open. What I'd like to ask at this point, and I'd probably ask the same question come March or April, is what might we have learned either so far or what might be on the horizon with regard to adjustments that maybe need to be made for the ninth grade experience, but as importantly for these ninth graders as they're going into 10th grade. Have you had conversations about what expectations of the 10th grade teachers that are going to be getting these guys next year, and what sort of might those experiences be, and how different might that be?
I think
And I
that,
know it's early in the game, and if this is a March conversation, I'm all in, just throwing it out.
but I think that's why the way we've structured PD this year has been important. Like when the decision was made not to have it be just a grade 9 PD with the UDL PD with Ian Wilkins, we wanted to make sure that all English teachers at both schools, were invited so that everyone on either end of that spectrum would be able to have conversations with the ninth grade teachers about how it's going, but also to be taught the same different types of strategies so that the students who we have in ninth grade, those 10th grade teachers have been in the same PD that we've had, and they've heard about our different successes with different things that we've been trying. So I feel like they've, in some way, have been supported in the same structure as we have moving forward.
Good, because there'll be lessons learned that they will have a new, perhaps a new set of expectations about what to expect from their first year of kids who have gone through, ninth graders who have gone through the leveling.
And I think also all of the students have had, high expectations in terms of, completing their work, doing it on time. Certainly if a student is working hard on an assignment and can't get it done on time and is working with the teacher to do that, like we've allowed extensions and, things like that on a one-on-one basis. But I know that in my 3 grade 9 classes, we always felt like that larger scale writing assignment was often one that kids would choose not to do if they were in a CP class where other students around them were choosing not to do that type of an assignment. But I would say that one student out of my 60-something has decided he's not writing that paper, whereas the other 2 that didn't, had some significant absences and are working with the teacher to get it done to make it up. So I felt pretty proud of the fact that I could see work completion and the students feeling, because they're surrounded by many students who want to do a good job, who are doing their work or doing it on time. Like I feel like those types of skills and things that are built into higher expectations, if a student chooses next year to take 10 honors, those things will continue with that student in that new setting.
Great, thank you very much.
Colleen?
Just a follow-up question, and thank you for the presentation. I also am a parent of a ninth grader, so I was talking to him about sort of his feedback as well. But back to the assessing, and so you're talking about looking at standards and growth. So is there a concrete measure that will be shared? I think you're sharing it with the students, but so our parents who are maybe accepting a more traditional approach to assessment and then grade, is there a concrete, measure of growth? So kind of like we see on MCAS, right? We see the growth percentile and how much they've grown, and that data is so informative. Has there been thought about, sort of producing something like that for the student and the parent?
I don't think yet. I think individual teachers, share rubrics with parents and students in different ways. I have a website where I put the rubrics that I'm using on my website. The parents can access and share them with students, and I'm sure that the other teachers do as well. I don't know how they share their rubrics,
Right.
but we are all using the same common rubric. So, but it's
That will show the
yeah.
growth within the rubric,
Yeah.
you're saying, okay.
So I think it's something to think about of the other standards, like those are the writing standards. I think those are easier to use a rubric in
Right.
order to assess. But I think it's something to consider, and that might mean a discussion about standards-based report cards at some point, but
Right.
we're not bringing that up today.
I was not suggesting that.
We're not,
I
not
was
at all.
not suggesting that, so that was not where we were going.
Not my question.
The whole, everybody just.
Sorry.
But Colleen, I think the point that you're making too about sharing rubrics, I think if the ninth grade team is looking at rubrics as assessing writing, that might be a discussion around sort of just a gathering of that either mid-year or the end of the year, right? Because some of the data that we gather in English can be difficult to demonstrate as different than testing data,
Yes.
right? So even a gathering of portfolios so that a student can show 3 pieces of writing in January to their parents to see, here are the rubrics, here are the pieces of writing, and know that that's a conversation so that you're seeing that as well. I think that's a point well taken.
I think we see that more in elementary levels,
Right.
you know, because,
Yeah.
just because of their age and sort of the parent, you know, sort of being closer to the work.
Yeah.
And it's really helpful, you know, I remember going in and, you know, they have it all laid out and it's amazing to see the growth. So now where you're really looking at that growth individually, but in a class like this, it would be really important, so parents, you know, of student 2 and student 1 can understand sort of how that's all being assessed, you know, and that they're still pushing student 2 to go even further, where we're also noticing the growth of student 1. My other question was, and I think you talked about this a little bit, Amy, in the Lord of the Flies example, but one of the things that came up in my little feedback with my 9th grader was balance of student participation and contribution to discussion. And so you were talking about sort of the small circle or whatever the conversation they were having. And if that's out of balance, you know, sort of what is your approach to taking care of that so that, you know, they come back together? Because I can imagine that, you know, kids have different attention spans or interests, and we're asking them to sort of all come together at the same point.
So I'd say that we don't do as much large group conversation where a teacher would just ask a series of questions. It's a lot more small group, you know, different type of strategies in order to make sure that, you know, it's different if 3 students are talking than 20.
Right.
So there's a lot of small group conversations, different strategies to try to encourage, like if I'm going around the classroom and a student who doesn't feel comfortable talking with the whole class says something that's brilliant, you know, being able to bolster his self-esteem and be able to say, you know what, I'm gonna call on you so that when we get back together, that, you know, raise your hand because that was really great and I want everyone to hear it. You know, so that trying to make every student who says something like that to be able to feel welcome and open and proud of what types of things were said in the small group so that they feel more open to sharing it in the large group. So there are a lot of more smaller conversations that are happening around the room, and the pull back together is a little shorter than, you know, like I remember in my own classes in school where that whole class type of situation took up the bulk of the class. I would say that like my classes are often structured with that mini lesson at the beginning, a lot of independent and small groups stuff in the middle, and like 10 minutes of whole class at the end. And that what they're doing in their small groups, you know, changes pretty quickly to try to move the types of questions to different places to try to get us away from perhaps an area of boredom, or if a group if I hear a group has kind of succeeded in that one area, they can start on the next task, even if the other groups haven't.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. I just feel like it seems like there's a more hands-on approach for the teachers with this mixed class, with kids at different levels, learning at different levels. And with, like a lot of you guys have asked the questions I wanted to ask, but the one thing that I was wondering was in terms of like the grading and the extra time maybe that it takes a teacher to sort of evaluate the kids' different levels and you know, their assignments and different grading for them. I'm just wondering if the teachers actually are struggling with finding the time to make sure that they can put the effort into making sure that, you know, they're kind of acknowledging all the different levels that they're dealing with, as opposed to just, you know, instructing a CP class and instructing an honors class where, you know, the expectations are pretty clear. It just sounds like it's more work for the teachers, and I'm just wondering if they have voiced any concerns in terms of the time that it may take them over and above what it was like last year for them.
I would say the big plus for us is that we're all in a PLC together. So when we sit down to create all the different essay options, we're all not doing that in isolation. We're working together to do it as a team. So I didn't sit down and go, I'm going to make up these 5, and then someone else is doing it in their own room. So we're working on that together during our PLC time, looking at student work to try to determine whether that what we hoped would happen. So it helps that we have that time together built into the day.
And how often is that again?
Once every 6 days.
Okay. And do you think that's enough?
I mean, we certainly we still eat lunch together every day. We still talk
Oh,
to each
okay.
other. I mean, it's not like we don't.
Yeah.
It's
just that one time.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
scheduled. But we also still, if that's B block, a lot of us have B block as prep. So it's,
Okay.
if we happen to be in the same, in the workroom together, we bounce ideas off of each other all the time.
Okay.
I would say that on the front end, it's more work to be able to try to create all those different options, but at the same time, it's because of the way that we spend so much more individual time with students, we get to know our students a lot better, so that in having those conversations, it takes away a lot of that looking at student work as the means to get to know the student and what the student needs, because we're doing that while we're in the classroom, and we're giving feedback with students while we're in the classroom so that their final products are better. So I think the workload is just different on different ends.
And I'm just wondering if, if this type of instruction could actually be done if it was like it was last year, where you just have CP and honors. Like, why couldn't a teacher do the same thing in those classes?
Well, I was just going to comment on that. I think that the beauty in all of the teachers in the English department working together and having that connection from Gowan is that, this type of instruction and really providing options for students and having more of that mix of small group opportunities within the class for students to talk amongst themselves, to challenge each other, for the teachers really to get to know their students. We hope to see that. I mean, that's something we're working on with curriculum coordinators across departments, just really that idea of teacher as facilitator, teacher providing check-ins throughout the classroom, students really doing, we talked about today, more of the heavy lifting and doing more of the work within the classroom. So I think, yes, there's mixed level classes in grade 9, but I think even as our teachers know those students more and help them to make recommendations on whatever track they should go on, we would love to see the same types of instructional strategies across the board. I think we're trying to move away from that idea of honors and AP are rows and teacher in the front of the classroom lecturing full class. I think we're trying to see more of a mix of those opportunities for our students to help them grow and be challenged in different ways.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a class of 12 honors. I do the same type of things with them. Same type of a style of
You mean
setup.
like a different grade level?
Yeah.
Like
Grade 12.
Oh,
Yeah,
12
it's grade 12,
Okay.
it's honors, it's a whole different ball game of students, but I'm still giving them different options of what to work on and still conferencing with individual students and.
So do you teach them differently now that
I think
that we have the leveling? It's
I
kinda
think that
like
the
you bringing
PD
that
has
in.
informed my practice in a way that has made me reconsider how I would teach all of my classes, because I think they're good strategies for no matter what type of a group of learners that you have in front of you. Yes, definitely.
Tom?
I'm sorry, you done?
Yes, I am, thank you.
Going back, you had said there was only one negative feedback from parents. How many parents have you gotten feedback from? Ballpark, I don't mean, you don't
I
have
would
to say
say
exactly.
If I saw 15 grade 9 parents we probably saw like 65 maybe at parent conferences between the group of us. If I
So
had to take a
about-
ballpark
about
guess.
60%, 70% of,
No, probably like 40%. I wouldn't say that half the parents came to conferences, no.
I would also have to think that if somebody was upset, they would have come.
I would hope so.
So.
Or they might, after tonight, but. Which is great, because we'd like to hear the feedback, so.
I think Doug has something to say.
Do you have something, Susan?
Yeah, super,
Okay,
very
sorry,
quickly.
I didn't see it.
Thank you for the update. This is a topic that I'm incredibly interested in and was looking forward to the update. It was really helpful. I look forward to kind of more data-driven information in February, March timeframe. I had sent Kara a message just hoping that, I think the theory is you raise the bar and kids kind of rise to the occasion, and my hope is that we can kind of see that along with kind of the high flyers continuing to fly, right? And so if there's a way to think about how to bring that data forward, I'm interested to see how you're going to assess that, because I don't think English is easy, right? Like it just, and measuring growth is difficult. So ELA as a topic area is just so abstract in many ways, and more so than math or science. And so I'm very interested to see kind of what you guys bring forward on how you do that assessment. But I think it's great to hear kind of the approach that you're taking. And, you know, I agree with Amy. I certainly think that there's those strategies that you could take in a CP class versus an honors class. But that to the side, it's great to kind of hear that so far things are feeling kind of like they're going well. I spoke with a friend who has a ninth grade son who I believe is a high flyer, and he's really enjoying it. He's reading Lord of the Flies also and doing group work and really feeling very confident about it and positive about it. So it's good news. Thank you.
So I think first I'd like to start off by saying to Mrs. Haggerty, thank you for having the courage to be willing to try this, right? And I think if you knew all the feedback that you were going to get when you started this idea, I don't know if you would have been willing to put your toe in the water like this. But at the heart of this, right, when you look at the parts, when you look at the increased collaboration among teachers, when you look at the focus on standards and the collaboration that you now are kind of has been created from this change, when you look at the engagement of students, and it's not missed on me that we need to come back in the spring and talk about, you know, qualitative data, right? We need to be able to also provide quantitative data in regard to growth. The best way for us to do that may be to actually bring samples of student work so that you can see what our high flyers are developing. And you can see within the same class, within the same context, what that might look like. But none of this would have happened, Bridget, if you weren't willing to kind of share what you had as an idea and bring this forward, which was embraced by Amy, supported by Kara, and now we're here. You know, I think if we had a do-over, things that I think we would have tried to do differently are communicate earlier and often, right? I think, you know, Bob mentioned this earlier, just in regard to just something else, but, you know, I think brought more people into the conversation. But in looking at where we are now and where we need to be, we will come back in the spring. We will be able to provide concrete data so that people can kind of see it and see what the change looks like and feels like. And I don't know if we can possibly hear from maybe more teachers and maybe even some students, right? Because, you know, they're the proof positive, right? But none of this would have been possible if you weren't willing to give this crazy idea a go. And so I'm really proud of you for being willing to do that, so thank you.
And we've appreciated all of your support with this as well.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, Amy, you might as well stay.
Nice try. Next up, I'd like to invite our new Director of Guidance, David Robinson. He and Amy McLeod are going to talk about the program of studies for 2020 and 2021.
Hey everyone. It's nice to see all of you, most for the first time. So I look forward to, as time goes by, I'm sure I'll get a chance to meet most of you, a lot more than I know you right now. Briefly before we start, I just want to say after being in a previous district for 18 years, this transition has been extremely refreshing, and I have been nothing but impressed with everything that goes on in this district. Most importantly, the students. Students are absolutely amazing, which you probably already know that. The staff is just hard to put into words, but they're very team-centered, and they've been so supportive, especially even just for myself personally as I've entered the building. So I'm very excited to be part of the team, and there are a ton of great things going on at the high school, but I'm also looking forward to finding any areas of development that we could even improve things. So thank you all just for that. As far as the program of studies, before we jump into specifics, just to review kind of the overall process that we take when we update the program of studies. First, we ask the department coordinators and the curriculum coordinators to talk to their teachers, to review everything that's currently taking place. And then they ask for feedback from both teachers and students to put together an overall plan of action. After that, Principal McLeod and I then met with the curriculum coordinators and department coordinators, one subject at a time, so we could discuss each subject and any proposed changes. Tonight, we're just here to review the chart, which covers all of the proposed changes from this year into the 2021 school year. And you'll see that some of these are more substantive, while others are just simple changes into the course descriptions. At this point, the program of studies is a working draft, so we're here to present to provide you the final draft of our program of studies, and we'll look forward to moving forward. I would suggest if we could just maybe go through the whole list of items first, and then we can circle back to any department that you have any specific questions on, if that's all right. It's all right with you? All right, thank you.
Okay with everyone? Can I start?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to start with English. So I had forwarded along a chart to you, but then I just gave you a hard copy of it as well. So the hard copy is the most updated, the right one, yeah. So it says WMHS POS changes for 2021. Does everybody? Yeah. So we'll start with English. You know, really, we looked at 2 course descriptions in English, and you're going to see course descriptions throughout the program of studies that have been revised or updated. And all that is a reflection of, you know, programming is an iterative process. So as teachers teach a course, they make some changes. Then sometimes we find we look at a book and it hasn't been changed in a few years. So you'll notice that there's a few departments that really dug deep this year, and they went into course descriptions and made sure that those were correct and they were accurate, that we could really sell courses well. So that's basically what happened in English for 2 courses, for contemporary thought and for Shakespeare. And so in addition to those course descriptions in English, the teachers also felt, and Bridget could have spoken to this a little bit too, there was really a need to bring back a public speaking elective. We're actually finding that there's a trend for public speaking electives to come back into schools, which is kind of cool. They went away for a long time, and they're kind of making a comeback. So being a little on the cutting edge, getting one in there, seeing if it's interesting to kids, and see if we can get kids to sign up for it. So again, anything that we add in and we talk about as add-ins tonight, they're all pending on student interest if we're talking about an elective. So we'll talk about that through the night.
Nice. And in the World Language Department, there's basically just updates of course descriptions, and they were basically adapted and included to include the ACTFL standards, basically the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. So the department really dug through and basing off of those standards to update the course descriptions.
And we would be remiss if we didn't add with that. You'll notice the update there is really around oral language acquisition. Mrs. Manzi has worked really hard with Mr. Reynoso at the high school to get that sort of oral language acquisition through those standards in the courses. They've been doing that for a couple of years, and now the language in the program of studies reflects that change there. So I think that's important. Mathematics has a few changes. We are adding a discrete mathematics course in the 12th grade. We thought it was important to have another option for seniors since we do require 4 years of math. We find that in senior year, students who are not taking calculus or pre-calculus, we really need to find some options that work for them, that help them start thinking about perhaps applications of mathematics. And so there was a little shift in the math department. The idea of eliminating financial algebra because we felt that was too similar to personal finance, and so there really weren't enough students to both be taking financial algebra and personal finance. And so since the personal finance course is going to run in business, we're going to keep that one running. But we didn't want to sort of remove a senior elective in math and not replace it with something. So there is a course description in there for discrete mathematics. Lindsay Mosca, the new math curriculum coordinator, had a similar course where she came from. So she's going to work with the teacher to sort of create that course. They're excited about it to get that running. A few small changes as well. Advanced Algebra and Trig is no longer called that. It's actually going to be called Pre-Calculus Level 2. It's more accurately reflects what the course is. And then also a course description for accounting and mathematics.
All right, and then Performing Arts Department, there's been some exciting revisions for the theater offerings, and that's to attract some more student interest and participation in the program. So they're proposing adding three courses. One, the history of the theater. Another one is acting for the stage and screen. And the third one is directing for the stage and screen. So those are three brand new electives that will be offered. And again, as Mr. McLeod said, basically a big piece of the whole course selection process is to generate the interest and, all hands on deck to promote all these different opportunities to make sure that students are aware of all the options that they can make, and we'll see where the numbers fall. The one removal was the History of Music and Critics Guide to Performing Arts. That hasn't run in several years. I think that was more of a cleaning up in the overall program of studies to reflect the most recent offerings.
Well, that's me. Sorry, science, tech, and engineering. So the table that you see at the start of their section is new. It's streamlined. It better, actually, this is a conversation that came from a parent that we had in over the summer. Susie, you had connected me with a parent who, we have all these upper level science offerings, and the way you looked at the book, you couldn't really tell that the way it was laid out. So they did a great job better representing all the options that upper level classes have. There is the 10th grade offering. The idea is that we would like to provide access for all students to take chemistry in 10th grade, either at the college or the honors level. So the idea there is the department feels strongly about ensuring equity for all students, similar to what we were talking about earlier with English, but really increase rigor for all students, and have a sense that students leave, even though they have to take multiple years of science in school. We really feel that it's important that students have both biology and chemistry under their belts before they graduate. That includes adding supports to chemistry. So that's part of the plan around that piece, but that would be a shift. And so students, environmental science, which a small number of 10th graders currently take as their 10th grade science course, that would become one of the 11th grade choices. So students still could take environmental science, but it would be after they take the basics of biology and then chemistry. Additionally, in STEM, or STE really, the computer science offerings, we're doing a lot of work to sort of revise the offerings there. Addition of a new course, which is a Project Lead the Way course, and I don't know how much you know about Project Lead the Way. It is a organization that we work with currently for our engineering class. And we are going to partner with Project Lead the Way to get some training and support and curriculum writing support for our teacher for both cybersecurity, which is one of their courses, and AP Computer Science Principles. Right now, we offer the other AP Computer Science course, which I can't think of which one it is. It's not Principles, but we got some feedback from former graduates. I don't know if any of you remember Tom Callahan, who came back and gave us some feedback around which course we should offer, because the students around him in engineering actually found that more kids who took computer science principles were actually having more success in college with what they needed. If students want to take the other AP computer science class, which is I'm completely blanking on, I apologize. It is Java, but it's no longer called Java. It's called something else, but it is the Java course. We can provide it to them online, but we think this will be a better offering for them. And we are no longer offering tech explorations. That was our entry-level course, but we're not going to run that next year. Instead, we're going to try to get kids to go into cybersecurity. We can teach them some of the same standards, but in a little more interesting, exciting way. So we're hoping that boosts our numbers in some of those courses.
The next department, Social Studies Department, there will be an addition of 2 new elective choices. One will be genealogy, which will be open to all grades 9 through 12, and that'll be a full year course. And then we're also looking to add the AP psychology in addition to what we currently offer, the CP level psychology.
The next 2, no big changes in TV and visual arts, no changes in health, life skills, and culinary, but there are some changes in wellness. So as you probably know, I think Brendan Kent was here talking about Project Adventure, and what a great opportunity we have with that grant to have the Project Adventure course at the school. So we've been thinking about ways to get students to use it more. So by combining Wellness 9 and 10, kids are going to have double opportunities to go out and use those materials. So given the number of staff members we have, by combining 9 and 10, and then combining 11 and 12, it's going to help us free up the schedule a little bit. So we're going to be able to mix students in those classes a little bit more. It frees up the schedule, stops putting some locks on the schedule, which impacts numbers in other places. But it also will help students have access to some of the different units that have been sort of separated by grade. We're not going to do that anymore, so we want students to have more access to these units that seem to be impactful, such as Project Adventure, such as lifetime activities where kids are learning about healthy choices in wellness. We're also working on, and we don't see it in there, but there's also some conversation about some electives that we're hoping to maybe try to pilot an elective. I'm not sure that we'll be able to get something in a handbook for next year, but we're hoping to pilot something so that when we come back to you next year, we have sort of a different way of approaching wellness. So we're looking forward to that.
And the last piece with special ed, there were some updates to the program descriptions. So basically our PAL program, School Life, there was just updating of the language that was put in the previous program of studies. And that was it for that.
Yep. So those are where the changes are. I know you may have some questions about overall process or maybe some other things that you pointed out in the handbook. Chris, thank you for your email around a little thing that we missed at the beginning. We appreciate a good proofreader. But we can take any questions or talk about any of these changes in particular or any of the other parts of the program of studies that you'd like to talk about.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just have a question about the chemistry part. For the children, students transitioning from 9th grade to 10th grade, where, you know, they're only going to be offered the CP chemistry or the honors chemistry. And I just question how that's actually fair or equitable to those students, to all the students. And why was the choice taken away? I'm just wondering, I just don't know if it's what's best for all the students, especially maybe our special ed population. And I say that only because I don't really remember taking chemistry, to be honest with you, but I do know that it does have sort of a focus on math. And a lot of the students who are special ed may not have those tools yet, and they may not be ready. So I worry about those kids who may be sort of forced to have to take chemistry, and A, not feel comfortable, B, not have the tools to be able to do it. And I don't want to see them struggle even more, to create more anxiety for them. And I just wonder if, I know you said this wasn't a done deal, but I'm just wondering if, you would consider possibly maybe making like the environmental science class available to the kids who may need something other than chemistry.
Right. So, I mean, when we talk about the equity piece of it, so right now, I think the numbers are about, we have 18 sophomores who are not taking chemistry. And to be honest, I think we're doing kids a disservice if we don't help provide access to the curriculum. I think that when you talk about sort of foundational thinking around science, biology and chemistry are important. They are DESE-aligned courses. DESE highly recommends that you take kids all the way through physics. We're not going there. We're only going to chemistry. We have many of our kids that do go on to physics, but we're not taking all of our kids there. I think when you look at 2- and 4-year schools, even 2-year programs, they're looking for kids to have a basic experience in biology and in chemistry. And I hear you. The last thing that we want is for any of our kids to struggle or to feel anxiety about this. And I think the department has thought a lot about this. I think what we're talking about is students, in order to provide all students access to chemistry, we're going to need to provide additional supports to chemistry. So the supports that we provide right now to environmental, which would be a co-taught situation with a special educator in the room, we can do that in chemistry. Other classes that aren't necessarily co-taught, that would just be supported with a paraprofessional, we can do that in chemistry as well. I think the piece that you talked about, Amy, around special education students who may have skill math deficits or math skills identified in their IEP. Algebra 1 is really the prerequisite for going into college level chemistry. So for the bulk of our students, 98, 99% of our freshmen, they will have accomplished that by the time sophomore year. Like we do with all programming, there are always going to be exceptions. There are always going to be opportunities where a student may not be have a good fit for a course. Sometimes we have to do exceptions around graduation requirements for foreign language for certain students because of an IEP. We may have to do that for a few students where we would allow them to take environmental as a sophomore year. So it's not off the table for a possibility. It's just not the track that we want to line up as a default. So what we really want to do is make sure that we're equitably challenging all students to rise to that occasion, be sure that we're providing support so that students know that we think they can perform at high levels if given the right supports, and provide that avenue for them.
So if there is going to be a 10th grade, say college prep, chemistry class that maybe a student with special needs is going to be in, so you're saying it would be a co-taught?
We provide co-taught or supported classrooms, not based on the content, based on student need. So we have co-taught and supported classrooms across the building.
So with a co-taught, just so I understand how a co-taught is run, that is with an MSN, someone who's actually a qualified special ed teacher?
Educator.
And do we have teachers like that now?
We do. We have
so-
co-taught classes in science across the board.
Okay, so in chemistry, so that those services
We may have to
would-
do a little shift depending on our numbers. So it's sort of a numbers game that we play, depending on where our kids land in courses. We don't let their IEPs drive the courses. We want all our courses to be accessible to all kids.
Yeah, I feel like if there are options for them, that would be great, only because some kids with language-based learning disabilities, you know, they have a hard time sort of distinguishing symbols.
Agreed.
And that's kind of what chemistry is. So going in, even though they may have a little bit of math support, that, you know, you factor in the symbols as well for them, and that they're sort of struggling right off the bat in that regards. So
Agreed.
I just struggle and worry about that for them.
And I understand that worry. I would also say that chemistry has changed greatly in terms of the new standards, right? And so we're really going to sort of a hands-on, minds-on approach to chemistry in all levels. I think at the honors level, we're really talking about higher levels of mathematical calculations, whereas at the college level, we're really talking more application of chemistry. So it really is slightly different. And I know I currently have my own child in chemistry, so I see the studying at night. It's like flashbacks for me, right? So I think we all have sort of these connections to chemistry. It seems to be the course, I would argue, and I know Dave and I came from the same school in our last school. Chemistry seems to be a course that we hear a lot about, that students, it can be a struggle for some students, right? And so we're keenly aware of the supports that are going to be needed moving forward. I think what's exciting is, the partnership between our science teachers and our special educators, really saying that this is something that we want to try in terms of providing that. We may have a student, for example, who's a freshman who doesn't pass Algebra 1. We would have to make an exception for that student because they will not be ready for chemistry. So in that case, the student would go to environmental, or maybe we would have to make another choice for a year until they're ready for chemistry.
Okay.
So there will be exceptions.
Yeah,
There
and I
always
feel
are.
like, maybe you can answer the question in regards to how many students, by the time they are seniors, don't actually end up taking chemistry? Because I feel like overall, they do eventually get there. And it just takes a little longer for them.
Most of the students who go to environmental do not go to chemistry at this point. Because at that point, the way our handbook is written, it's not required. So by doing this, we're really sort of challenging kids to get to chemistry. And if we make an exception, we can say, well, we'll make an exception, but we'd really like you to take chemistry now your junior year, or at least try it and see if we can provide supports then, because it is a requirement now. So it kind of changes the game a little bit. Kids may need an extra year to get there, and if so, we'll figure that out on a case-by-case basis as needed.
And I do agree with the fact that students should be challenged, but there is a certain population that, just being at school is a challenge enough.
Agreed.
So to sort of have to force them to take something that they may not be comfortable with, I just wanted everybody to be mindful of possibly allowing some sort of an option. And if that's the case, that makes me feel better.
Good, I'm glad.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions, comments? Okay. I just had a couple of minor things. I think next year, we need to look at the timeline here, because it's
Mm-hmm.
my understanding that, like, parents have already looked at this and felt as though this was done.
Yeah, no, we haven't shown this publicly at all. We talked about ninth grade options, which generally haven't changed. There were no changes to the ninth grade program of study this year. We talked about in the eighth grade parent pieces sort of the direction of departments and the course offerings that we offer. There was no intention on our part to even to be honest, we were just finishing this up on Thursday, so this was sort of a work in progress. I know some of the departments, when they're talking to eighth grade parents, are kind of alluding to the direction of the school and the departments.
A lot of the parents were left with the impression that this is what you got. So-
And if I could just interrupt for a moment, I was one of those parents who
Yeah.
was at the Academic Pride Night, and I did get the science course, and it is here, just.
The handouts from the departments, yeah, they
so
give out
it was
handouts.
maybe where the parents
Okay.
saw that information,
Yeah.
because that's what was given to us, and I questioned it actually.
Yeah.
So, but
So-
I didn't realize that it was not set in stone.
Yeah, so we can definitely look at this. I mean, I think we would be talking about moving the handbook up to, November, which is challenging, right? I mean,
Right.
we're just starting school, and then we're already creating the handbook for next year. So we definitely can look at the timeline and figure this out. I think the.
Or back that out,
I was gonna
and
say,
not-
can you reschedule the?
The eighth
that-
grade part.
that
We can.
orientation?
Yeah.
We're actually talking about, department
Yeah.
coordinators want it to be even earlier, because the feedback from parents was so great about having it early when they're doing tours at parochials and privates. And so we're in now the mix, and we had parents come last week saying, this was great to give this information. We're actually thinking differently about Wakefield High School now that we have this information in front of us.
Right, so we're negotiating a funnel, right? We're trying to fit everything in to a very discrete window, right?
Well, I mean, I think that if there's a change to the pacing of a class, or for example, pulling out in 10th grade, it's chemistry, only chemistry, that might not be something that's necessary to share with the ninth graders.
Sure.
So the handout might have been a good idea to just sort of not focus on
Sure.
a change that may or may not happen.
Sure. So what we currently offer is blank.
This is for ninth grade.
Or, right,
This
what
is
we
what we
currently
currently
offer for ninth grade is
Right
blank.
now. Yeah.
Exactly,
Right,
and
yeah.
because that's all they do.
Okay, my other question was, I'm surprised to see only one drop in this list.
What do you mean?
Well, there's one thing in the performing arts that you're not offering because it hasn't been run in several years. I would think that there'd be more than one. And my curiosity is, how many times is an offering that doesn't run before it gets withdrawn from the list?
I don't know, because I've only been here doing this with
Yeah.
you now twice.
Yeah.
And I
So-
know last year we had not very many drops at all. So those that are on there for performing arts, we thought about dropping last year, we didn't. Everything that's in the program of studies doesn't necessarily run.
Right.
We do kind of manage around, are there any courses that no one signs up for? If there are courses that only one or two kids sign up for, those would be dropped.
You don't run them, but I was curious, like, the following year, do you still offer it? And then how many times do you offer it before you just say, why are we wasting our time?
Well,
You
so
know.
to answer the question, I think all the courses that are listed on here as revisions are the courses that didn't run this year. Shakespeare has run in the past. It did not run this year. It ran 2 years ago, the year before I got here. Contemporary thought almost ran this year, almost. We're like this close. So we want to give it more time. I would err on leaving the courses there. It doesn't hurt anything to try to offer them. It doesn't hurt us in any way to try to offer kids choices. If the courses become obsolete, as you're saying, and there's no one showing any interest, then I would say that we remove them after a couple of years. Agreed.
And there could be a point that you might not, have anybody qualified to teach a certain course. You had somebody who had a specialty, and now they've retired, and
Right.
there's nobody really to backfill that.
Right, right.
That could come up.
It could. Good point. Yeah.
And one thing I noticed was not on any of the list, and maybe I'm just missing, is any sort of geology in there?
No. Human
Not-
human geography.
No, geology,
We don't
like
have
rocks.
geology. We have no rock courses, no geology.
It's like environmental science.
Yeah, ish.
Ish, right.
Environmental-ish, but no, we don't have a
Yeah.
geology course. I don't know if we've ever
Interesting.
had one.
Okay,
I
interesting.
I can ask the science department, I don't know.
I would imagine it's closer to oceanography, from a physical science perspective.
Let me go with an ish again? I don't know. I don't know.
Other questions? Okay, so we have a motion.
Move that the school committee approve the Wakefield Memorial High School Program of Studies 2020 to 2021 as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. We certainly have plenty of discussion. All those in favor? Okay, it would be unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
That concludes my section.
includes your section, huh? All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
May I ask the superintendent a question before we move on?
I would hope so.
Thank you. Doug, your very first update on Learn Anywhere.
Yep.
Wanted to find out, not intending to spark a monumental conversation around Learn Anywhere.
Sure.
But my memory is that there were more than one component with regard to Learn Anywhere. The snow
Correct.
bags, blizzard bags and snow days was a hefty piece of it, but it wasn't the only part of Learn Anywhere. There were summer pieces and there were offline pieces as well. What is our thinking with regard to those other components of Learn Anywhere, notwithstanding whatever the commissioner may want to do? Because my memory is that as a supporter of Learn Anywhere, I liked the fact that there were multiple parts to it.
Right, and the other two parts to Learn Anywhere were our summer work in all content areas.
Yep.
But it was also opportunities to create learning activities for students outside of school as a natural part of the experience that kids were having in our system. And so the other two parts are still alive and well. And thank you for the clarification, Tom, I appreciate it. But the one part around what we do on snow days won't continue, but the other two parts will absolutely continue. In fact, we hope to actually expand those and make those, to broaden not only options for students and how they demonstrate what they're learning outside of school, but really try to think about more broadly as well around, online learning activities for students, both during the school year and in the summer as well. And that conversation, we think, is going to naturally lead to kind of early college options for students as well. So there's a lot of irons in the fire that relate to this, and I think we'll be, I'm excited just in regard to the conversations that we're having, but I think in the spring we'll be reporting more on that.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate the
I'm
ask.
glad to hear that.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to subcommittee reports. Finance and Facilities is meeting this Friday at 7:30 in the superintendent's office. Meeting is posted. This meeting will be with just the subcommittee and the administration, where we should expect to get a more concrete framework where some real numbers are going to start to plug in. We've been having a lot of philosophical discussions so far, but we haven't really worked with any hard numbers. And I think this is where we're going to start to put some pedal to the metal, I guess. And also the next week, if any of you have the opportunity to attend, it's, what is it, Tuesday and Wednesday of next week? The principal
Yes,
presentations?
17th and 18th.
Yeah, so
Yep.
Tuesday and Wednesday at the Galvin, there'll be the presentations from the directors and principals.
Like budget presentations.
Yeah.
Right.
Their requests. And maybe, what their priorities are. This is where we get to listen to where they feel they need to make changes.
3 to 5.
3 to 4:45.
Thank you.
Okay. Labor and personnel? Any
Thank
update?
you, Mr. Chairman. We We continue to maintain a pretty good pace with Unit A. We have another negotiation tomorrow night. We have 2 more scheduled before the end of the calendar year. Progress is paced, but moderate. However, I would think that there is a different sort of tone and feeling in the room in the last 3 months or so than we had some experiences last spring. I do not think that we will be in a position to be recommending anything before the end of the calendar year as we had originally hoped. But I would think that we'll probably be in a good place come January, likely to be having some really good conversations among ourselves about where we are at a couple sessions in January.
You said, I think I'm missing one meeting. I knew there's one tomorrow and one next Monday.
Right.
What's
Two. 2 meetings before the end of the year.
Oh, 2, I thought you said 3.
Oh, I'm sorry, no, two right now scheduled. Next
Tomorrow
week,
and
tomorrow
next
and
week.
next week.
Okay.
Yep.
Don't be sure I wasn't missing one.
Yeah.
While I have you, is there an update with the working group at all?
Oh, yeah, great, thank you. We hope to, we're working right now with members of trying to schedule a date as well there. We're hoping trying to land some night next week, either Tuesday, Wednesday. On the nights right now, I'm trying to get some feedback from members, and some, both all members as well as some key members. So we'll hopefully be announcing a date before this week is over, if not tomorrow.
A group that size, I'm sure there's never gonna be a day where you get
Well,
everybody.
it's not, no, that's one of the hard things about a group that size, but we certainly, we don't have, there isn't anyone that we ever want to exclude, that's for sure. But certainly you go down a list and you throw it and you land in the best place, whereas most people are able to pull it together. And then, so my goal would be that we have a meeting, at least one before the calendar year, and be able to have some good concrete news coming out of MSBA's meeting tomorrow, which is sort of why we want to be able to have something in play soon, and then use the forum that we'll have to create some a pace, a very aggressive pace come January.
Great.
It's gonna be tough scheduling with your labor meetings and Susie's subcommittees and the other committees that Susie and yourself are on, so it's gonna be tough scheduling it, so.
Yeah, well, it's a juggling act.
Good luck.
It's a larger group, so
Yeah.
we'll make it a priority.
So,
Thank you for
it's a
your
juggling
efforts.
act.
Student services, Amy.
So far, December 24th is open.
We have not met, but I do think that our surveys are hot off the press. I have not looked at them, but I do want everyone to know that they will hopefully be getting emailed to you, and we look forward to getting the feedback.
Okay.
Thank you.
And policy and communications.
Yep, we met tonight and reviewed 3 policies that we'd like to formally lay on the table at the next meeting on January 14th. So one we had laid on the table and took off the table, and we're putting it back on the table. That's the life-threatening allergy policy. So we have that one ready to be looked at, as well as new updated bullying policy, and an updated harassment and non-discrimination policy. So we will be laying those on the table on the 14th, and hopefully discussing them.
Are they, you've agreed with what the
Actually, we're
structure's
laying them
gonna
on the
be?
table right now.
I was gonna say, I think
That's why I'm like,
tonight.
it's
And
past
then
my bedtime.
discussion and-
Right, so we're laying them on the table tonight, and so we need to
For
get copies
discussion and vote.
for discussion and voting on the 14th, sorry.
Okay, so that's a motion.
Ah, that's important then, sorry, Amy.
Well, why don't you make the motion?
Oh, that's
Yeah,
my
you can
motion,
make it.
oh my goodness.
So
Move
why don't
that
you
the
say-
school
Yep, move that the school committee lay on the table 3 policies: the life-threatening allergy policy, the bullying policy, and the harassment and non-discrimination policy, as presented.
For 2 weeks.
For
No,
consideration,
On January 14th.
right, it'll be for the January 14th meeting for discussion and a potential vote.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. We'll have these laid on the table. All those in favor? Great. You'll distribute copies through Judy?
Yes.
Okay. And that way, everybody will have a chance to review. They'll be available for the public. And that way, on the 14th, if there's any discussion, we'll be all set.
Yep.
Future dates, as I said, we got we're not going to meet, this is our only meeting for December. Our next meeting will be January 14th here at WCAT. The 15th will be our State of the Schools. And then just mark that February 11th for your calendars in Boston. Okay. Any agenda items? I know I suggested we get a school committee handbook out in like January, February timeframe, but anything else? Okay. School committee comments. Start with Tom.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Ann?
No comments.
Susie?
I have just got a quick update from my work with the Sustainable Wakefield team. We've had a couple of meetings regarding trash and recycling at the schools with Bob and facilities Bob and the DPW folks, Claire. And so we're kind of making some progress on expanding kind of recycling that's going on in the schools. And also had a good meeting with Jason Pavey about the civics projects and how we can kind of connect those projects to some of the resources on the Sustainable Wakefield team. And I guess I would just say to the public to have a happy and safe holiday season, because we are not meeting before the end of the year. So.
Thank you. Amy?
No comments.
No comments? Tom?
No comment.
Colleen?
I would just echo Susie as well and tell our families and community to enjoy safe and happy and wonderful holiday season and Happy New Year.
Administrations?
No, same. Have a wonderful holiday.
Be safe in the throughout all your travels. The roads tomorrow are supposed to be pretty icy, so we'll see what happens. Motion to adjourn, please.
Move that the school committee adjourn its meeting of December 10, 2019.
Second.
Second. All those in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Christine needs a couple signatures.